The needle flashed silver each time it crossed the cloth, catching the moonlight that slipped through the warped boards of the attic wall. Clara Whitfield kept her shoulders bent against the cold and stitched another seam with fingers gone stiff from the hour. Below her, somewhere in the rooms of Mrs. Dobbins's boarding house, a clock struck midnight with a tired iron note. Rent was due at sunrise. She did not look at the coins on the crate beside her mattress. She knew their count by touch. $2.40, short again. The hem she worked belonged to a dress for the banker's wife, blue calico trimmed in lace that had cost more than Clara's winter coat. The woman had complained that the sleeves pulled at the shoulder. Clara had unpicked both and set them right. She would receive 75 cents in the morning if the banker's wife felt generous enough to remember the bargain she herself had made. Her thread knotted. Clara shut her eyes once, breathed through the sting behind them, then cut the knot with her teeth and began again. A sound rose outside the boarding house. Hoofbeats, slow and heavy on the frozen road. Few men rode through town at midnight unless trouble followed them, or they were trouble themselves. The hoofbeats stopped. She kept sewing. A minute later came another sound. Boots on the porch boards below. One tread only. Measured, unhurried. Mrs. Dobbins's dog, who barked at shadows in laundry lines, made no noise at all. Clara set the dress in her lap and listened. The front door opened. Murmured voices drifted upward through the floorboards, too low to catch. Then silence. Then the dog gave one uncertain whine. She rose and crossed to the narrow stair opening. Cold air climbed from below, carrying wood smoke, damp wool, and the sharp scent of horses. She descended 3 steps and could see the hallway by the light of a kerosene lamp. Mrs. Dobbins stood in her wrapper, hair pinned crookedly, one hand pressed to her throat. Facing her was a broad-shouldered man in a dust-dark coat, hat in hand, head bowed slightly because the ceiling forced it. Clara knew him by reputation before she knew his face. Elias Mercer of Mercer Ridge. Rancher. Widower, some said. Ruined man, said others. Hard as fence iron, said everyone. He turned then, perhaps hearing the board complain under Clara's foot. His eyes lifted to her. Gray, steady, not surprised. There she is, Mrs. Dobbins whispered, as if Clara were being fetched by lawmen. Clara straightened. If there is a matter concerning my rent, I am aware of it. There is, Mrs. Dobbins said, gaining courage, and a solution, if you possess any sense. Mercer put his hat back on. Come down, Miss Whitfield. It was not a request, yet there was no insult in it either, only habit, the manner of a man used to being obeyed by cattle, weather, and hired hands in whatever order they yielded. Clara descended the rest of the stairs. The hallway felt smaller with him in it. I do not receive callers at midnight, she said. No. His gaze moved briefly to the stair behind her, the thin blanket visible through the attic opening, the basket of mending beside the wall. You receive bills. Mrs. Dobbins made a strangled sound that might have been laughter. Clara's cheeks warmed. State your business, sir. My foreman's wife died last spring. Cooked for the hands, kept the house, managed stores. I have gone through 3 men who can brand calves straighter than they can boil coffee. He paused. Mrs. Dobbins says you can sew, keep accounts, and read legal print. Mrs. Dobbins lifted her chin. I said you were educated above your station and wasted on hems. Clara looked from one to the other. You discussed my circumstances without me present. We are discussing them now, Mercer said. She should have disliked the bluntness of him. Instead, she disliked that it left no room for false courtesy, and false courtesy was easier to fight. What do you want? A housekeeper. I'm not seeking a post. You are behind on rent. Mrs. Dobbins found sudden interest in the lamp chimney. Clara folded her hands to keep from clenching them. Many people are behind on something. Mercer's jaw shifted once, the nearest sign of impatience. I need the house run proper. I need ledgers made sense of. I need meals fit to eat. In return, wages, a room, board. I did not ask your charity. His gaze hardened. Good. I do not offer it. The words landed between them with the weight of a thrown tool. She studied him then in earnest. Wind had roughened his skin. A white scar crossed one knuckle. There was wear at the collar of his coat where cloth rubbed cloth too often before replacement. Whatever else he was not a man dressed in easy prosperity. Why me? She asked. Because you're working by moonlight to pay for another week in an attic. He glanced once toward the ceiling. And because Mrs. Dobbins says you finish what you start. The humiliation of being seen so clearly struck sharper than any insult. I would need terms in writing. Mrs. Dobbins gasped as if Clara had demanded the deed to the county. Mercer did not blink. Fine. Monthly wages, fine. 1 room with a lock. His eyes narrowed slightly. Done. I keep any earnings from sewing done on my own hours. Done. And if either of us wishes the arrangement ended, 1 week's notice. At that he considered her long enough that the lamp hissed loud in the quiet. Then he gave a single nod. Fine. Mrs. Dobbins threw up both hands. Then it's settled. Praise Providence. It is not settled, Clara said. I have not agreed. Mercer looked at her as if the rest of them had merely been circling what mattered. No, he said, you have not. The hallway held the cold like water in a trough. Clara thought of the attic roof that leaked in spring, thought of the banker's wife, thought of waking each morning to another sum she could not meet, thought unwillingly of a room with a lock. What is your house like? She asked. He seemed surprised by the question. Needs work. That was not what I asked. A flicker touched his face. Almost amusement. Almost. Drafty, he said. Kitchen stove runs hot. Porch leans east. Views wide. Do you shout? Sometimes. Do you strike? No. Do your men drink through the pantry? Not twice. Mrs. Dobbins crossed herself. Clara held his gaze another moment. Men had lied to her before in softer voices than his. Yet something in Mercer felt too rigid for easy deceit. Pride could make a man cruel. It could also make him plain. When do you expect me to leave? She asked. At dawn. She laughed then, once and without mirth. Of course. He reached into his coat, drew out folded papers, and handed them to her. A mortgage notice, tax demand, supply invoices months overdue, numbers marching toward disaster. I expect you to leave at dawn, he said, because if you can read those, you know I cannot wait longer. The room went still. Clara scanned the first page, then the second. Interest compounded wrong on one note, duplicate charges on freight, a missing receipt applied nowhere, sloppy bookkeeping bleeding a ranch dry one careless line at a time. She lowered the paper slowly. Who keeps these? Been 3 men at it, then 3 men have robbed you or were fools, likely both. For the first time that night, respect moved between them clean and unmistakable. Mrs. Dobbins clapped her hands once. There now. Providence again. Clara ignored her. I will need my own ledger books. You'll have them. Lamp oil. Yes, time. His answer came without pause. Take it. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous. Useful. At dawn, then, she said. Mercer stepped back and opened the door for her landlady as if the house belonged to him already. Wind drove in across the threshold, carrying frost and the smell of his horse. He looked at Clara once more. Pack light, he said. Road's rough. Then he was gone into the dark. She stood with the mortgage papers in her hand until the cold reached her bones. Above them, in the attic room, the unfinished blue dress waited under the moon. By dawn, the sky was the color of old tin, and the town wore frost like ash. Clara carried 1 valise, 1 bundle of folded linens, and her sewing basket. Everything else she owned could be left behind, because everything else had already left her years ago. Mrs. Dobbins stood on the porch in a shawl, arms tucked tight against the morning bite. You'll write if he buries you in work. If he buries me at all, I expect writing will prove difficult. The older woman sniffed. Sharp tongue. Keep it sheathed till you know where the knives are. Clara almost smiled. Mrs. Dobbins had never given kindness in a gentle wrapper, but she had given it often enough. Mercer waited beside a wagon hitched to 2 rangy bays. He had loaded sacks of flour, nails, lamp oil, and seed. Her belongings occupied less room than any one of them. He took the valise from her hand without asking and set it near the seat. I can lift my own bag. I know. He said nothing more. That seemed to be his favored method of conversation. He offered no hand for the climb into the wagon. She used the wheel spoke and settled herself on the bench. He mounted beside her, gathered the reins, and sent the team forward with a low click of his tongue. The town passed in slow fragments. The church steeple rhymed with frost, the barber sweeping yesterday into the street, the mercantile shutters still barred. Men on the boardwalk looked up as they rolled by. Some stared at Mercer. More stared at Clara seated beside him. A widow in last year's coat did not often leave town at sunrise with the hardest rancher in the county. She kept her spine straight and her eyes ahead. Once they cleared the last buildings, the plains opened wide and merciless. Brown grass bowed under ice. Fence lines ran like black stitching across the land. Far off, low hills shouldered against the pale horizon. The road jarred every bone she possessed. After a mile, Mercer spoke. "You get motion sick?" "No." "Lie if you need." "I have no need," he grunted, whether in approval or dismissal she could not tell. They rode another stretch in silence, broken only by harness leather, wheels over frozen ruts, and the distant caw of crows. Cold found every gap in her gloves. At length Clara unfolded the mortgage papers again. "You keep these in your coat?" "Where else?" "In a desk. In order. House has a desk. Does the desk know how to sort itself?" His mouth shifted at one corner. Almost. Then gone. She reviewed each page while the wagon rolled. Numbers steadied her. Numbers obeyed laws even when men did not. By the time the sun had climbed thin and white over the plains, she had identified enough waste to feed 6 ranch hands through winter. "Who purchases supplies?" she asked. "Foreman did. Then I did. You pay freight twice on flour. Do I?" "You did." "No more then." She turned another page. "This tax notice is incorrect. County clerk says otherwise. The county clerk cannot add." He looked at her then, full and direct. "You always this certain?" "Only when I am correct." That earned the smallest sound from him, not quite a laugh but close enough to prove the man possessed one. They crossed a creek where ice clung to the banks and the horses blew steam. Beyond it the land rose. Buildings emerged one by one, a barn leaning west, corrals patched with mismatched rails, a smokehouse, then the ranch house itself. It stood broad and weathered, 2 stories of gray boards scarred by years of wind. One porch post had been braced with fresh timber, another listed badly enough to shame the first. The place looked exactly like what it was, a stubborn structure refusing to collapse out of habit. Dogs barked as they approached. Men came from the barn, wiping hands on coats, hats low against the cold. Mercer reined in. 3 ranch hands waited by the gate, one young and freckled, one thick through the shoulders with a red beard, one older, narrow-faced, eyes quick as pins. Their gazes moved to Clara. "This is Miss Whitfield," Mercer said. "She runs the house. No explanation, no apology, no invitation for comment." The red-bearded man spat aside. "House is run poorly, but it is run." Mercer did not raise his voice. "You got a complaint, Boone?" Boone looked at the ground. "No." "Then get the feed sacks unloaded." The men moved. It was the first protection he had offered her, and he delivered it as if swatting a fly. He jumped down, then reached up at last, not toward her hand, toward the basket balanced beside her boots. She passed it to him and climbed down alone. Inside, the house smelled of cold ashes, coffee boiled too long, and damp wool drying where it should not. The kitchen was large but disordered, flour bin unlatched, pans hung where lids ought to be, onions sprouting in a basket beside spoiled potatoes. A ledger lay on the table under a horseshoe nail. Clara set her gloves aside slowly. "This kitchen has been assaulted." Mercer removed his coat. "Told you it needed work. This room needs salvation." He glanced around as if seeing it for the first time. "Can you do it?" "Yes." The certainty escaped before modesty could stop it. He nodded once, accepting the claim as a practical fact. "Good." A woman entered from the back hall carrying a kindling. She was small, near 60, with a face lined by weather and wit. Her hair was white under a dark scarf, and her eyes missed nothing. "So this is the miracle," she said. Mercer took the kindling from her. "Hannah. I know my own name." She looked Clara over, not unkindly. "You're thin." I had noticed. "Sharp, too." "Better and better." Hannah set more wood by the stove. "I come 3 mornings a week to see this fool doesn't poison himself. If you are staying, perhaps I may retire from the task." "You may not," Mercer said. "No one asked you." Clara's surprise must have shown, because Hannah smiled. He listens poorly, but he listens some. I'm next ranch east. Widow 20 years. That makes me ancient enough to say what I please. Then we shall get along, Clara said. Likely. Mercer handed Clara a ring of keys. Iron, worn smooth by use. Pantry, smokehouse, cellar, desk drawer, your room. Her fingers closed around them, heavy, real. Upstairs, second door, he added. Lockworks. Something in his tone made the simple fact carry weight. She climbed the stairs with her valise. The hall was narrow, boards polished by years of boots. Her room held a bedstead, washstand, small stove, one window facing east, and a patchwork quilt neatly folded. Nothing fine, nothing wasted. On the inside of the door hung a new brass lock. New. He had promised a room with a lock and spent money scarce enough to matter keeping his word before she arrived. She touched the metal once. Then she unpacked with efficient hands before gratitude could become dangerous. By noon, the kitchen fire burned clean. Spoiled food lay outside for pigs. Shelves had been scrubbed, and a pot of stew simmered with onion, barley, and the last decent carrots she could salvage. Boone entered twice and retreated once under the force of her stare, alone. At the table, she spread the ranch accounts in ordered piles. Mercer came in carrying harness grease on his hands. He stopped in the doorway. The room had changed. Windows cracked open despite the cold. Fresh bread scent rising from dough set near the stove. Ledgers stacked square. Table cleared save for one neat column of debts and one shorter column of errors. He removed his hat slowly. "What happened in here?" I began. He crossed to the papers. "This all mine?" "This all yours," she said, tapping the shorter stack, "is what others have taken from you." His face went still. "How much?" "Enough that anger would be reasonable. More than anger if wasted." He looked not at the numbers but at her. "You found this in half a day." "I found the obvious in half a day. The hidden will take longer." Silence stretched warm in the kitchen despite the frost outside. Then he did something stranger than kindness. He pulled out a chair and sat where she indicated without argument. "Show me," he said. So she did. For the next hour, the house held only the crack of stove wood, the turn of pages, and Clara's voice naming where money had gone to die. This invoice repeats the same barrel count under a second date. Mercer leaned over the table, forearms braced on either side of the ledger. Freight company claimed a delay. They claimed theft. He glanced at her. Difference? One is weather. One is lying. She drew another sheet free. "Here. Feed purchased in August at drought prices. Yet your herd numbers dropped in July. Why buy more after you sold cattle?" "I didn't sell enough." "No, but enough to reduce need." She slid the paper toward him. "Who wrote this order?" He studied the handwriting. "Pritchard." "The narrow-faced man outside?" "Yes." Then Pritchard should never hold a pencil again. Mercer's jaw tightened, though not in defense of his man. He took in figures slowly, lips moving once as he counted under breath. "You saying he robbed me?" "I'm saying he cannot account for these sums. Whether through greed or stupidity remains to be proven. Greed's easier to punish. Stupidity is more common." At that, he almost smiled again. It altered his whole face for the blink of it, making him look younger and more dangerous. A boot thudded on the porch. The door opened without knock. Boone entered carrying a coil of rope and stopped short at the sight of his employer seated obediently at a kitchen table while a woman directed his attention line by line. Boone's red beard twitched. "Need you in the south lot," he said to Mercer. Mercer did not look up. Then, "Say what for." Fence gave way. "Can you mend a fence?" Boone hesitated. "Yes." "Then mend it." The man's gaze cut toward Clara, sour as vinegar. "Since when does paper outrank cattle?" Mercer lifted his eyes at last. The room cooled 10 degrees. "Since I said so." Boone left without another word, shutting the door harder than needed. Clara returned to the page, though her pulse had risen. Men like Boone did not resent women quietly. They stored it. "You will lose hands if you shame them before each other," she said. Mercer leaned back. He shamed himself. That may be true and still expensive. He considered that. "You always warn the man you're helping?" "I prefer useful truths to pleasant ones." He rose. "Good." He took his hat and strode out to the yard. Through the window, Clara saw him cross to the fence line where Boone worked. No raised voices reached the house, but Boone's shoulders stiffened under whatever was said. Hannah arrived before dusk with eggs in her apron and gossip in both hands. I passed Boone cursing the Almighty, his father, and your employer in one breath. Productive morning? Moderately, Clara said. Hannah sniffed the stew and approved at once. You've done more in half a day than 3 bachelors in 6 months. I suspect the comparison flatters me unfairly. It flatters no one. Men alone live like wolves with poorer instincts. She lowered herself into a chair and watched Clara knead biscuit dough. You married? Hannah asked. No. Widowed? No. Disappointed? Clara's hands paused once in the flour. Yes? Hannah nodded as if confirming the weather. Good. Disappointment sands the foolishness off a person if it doesn't kill them. She asked nothing further, which was a rarer kindness than questions. By supper, the ranch hands filed in one by one, bringing cold air and the smell of horse sweat. They removed hats when they saw the laid table. Bowls waited steaming. Bread rested under cloth. Coffee smelled of beans rather than ashes. The young freckled hand stared openly. Did we rob a hotel? Sit down, Ned, Mercer said. They sat. No one reached first. Men unused to order often feared it. Clara ladled stew, set bread baskets down, then took the smallest place near the stove. She had served too many rooms not to know her assigned edge in one. Mercer noticed. He set his spoon aside untouched. Eat, he said. No one moved. He looked directly at Clara. That includes you. The room watched. She met his gaze, then served herself and sat. Only then did the others begin. For several minutes there was only the scrape of spoons and low sounds of surprised hunger. Ned swallowed too fast and coughed. Ma'am, this is the best meal since spring, Boone muttered. Low measure. It is an accurate measure, Pritchard said dryly. Clara filed away that the two men disliked each other nearly as much as either disliked discipline. Mercer ate steadily, saying nothing. Yet twice she caught him glance toward the bread basket as if confirming it remained real. When bowls emptied, Boone pushed back his chair. Housekeeper cooks. Fine. But if she aims to count every nail on the place, we'll spend winter listening to Paige's turn. Clara wiped her hands and answered before Mercer could. If nails had been counted sooner, perhaps fewer boards would be falling now. Ned choked on laughter and disguised it as a cough. Boone's face darkened. You calling us lazy? I'm calling this ranch neglected. If the word fits, wear it. The room stilled. Rapid anger sharpened him. You've been here one day, and already found enough waste to feed you better than you've been fed. He shoved to his feet. Mercer rose slower. That proved more alarming. Sit down, Boone. I won't be talked to by... Sit. One word. Flat as iron. Boone sat. Mercer remained standing another beat, then addressed the table. Miss Whitfield speaks on accounts and stores with my authority. Any complaint comes to me. Any disrespect comes once. No speech, no flourish. Yet every man there understood the line drawn. Clara did not thank him. Gratitude in public would weaken what he had done. She gathered bowls and carried them to the wash basin. A moment later, another pair of hands set plates beside hers. Mercer rolled sleeves to his forearms and reached for a towel. You needn't, she said. I know. He dried while she washed. Water steamed between them. Their shoulders nearly touched in the narrow space. Once his wrist brushed hers, rough skin against chilled knuckles. Neither remarked on it. After the men left, he stacked the last plate. Boone talks too much. You hire him. He works hard. So does a mule. He gave that near laugh again. Mule's cheaper. She turned to face him. In the clean kitchen, lamplight caught the fatigue around his eyes, the strain he wore like another coat. Why is this place failing, Mr. Mercer? He set the towel down carefully. Rain quit 3 years running. My father borrowed before he died. Then cattle fever took 40 heads. Then my wife got sick. The last words came with no change in tone, which made them heavier. Clara waited. She died in this house, he said. After that, I let matters slide that had no business sliding. The silence between them shifted shape. I'm sorry, she said. He looked past her to the dark window. Doesn't alter it. No, nothing more could be offered without trespass. He took up the lamp. "Lock your door at night," he said. "I intend to." "Good." He paused at the threshold, one hand on the frame, broad shoulders filling the doorway. Then, without turning, he said something true, and left, before response could be required. "House sounds different with you in it." The wind rose in the night and worried every board in the house. Clara woke twice to the groan of the porch and once to the remembered strangeness of a lock beneath her own hand. Each time she listened for footsteps in the hall. None came. At dawn, she built her stove fire, dressed in the blue wool she reserved for respectable appearances, and went downstairs before the men. The kitchen still held yesterday's order. She had known houses where neatness vanished like dew the moment labor ceased. This one seemed to want saving if shown how. She mixed biscuits by lantern light, set beans to warm, and started coffee strong enough to wake the dead or Boone, whichever proved harder. When Mercer entered, frost silvered his coat shoulders. He stamped boots on the mat and stopped at the smell. "You rise early. I rise employed." He removed gloves finger by finger. "There's a difference?" "One includes wages." He accepted the cup she handed him and drank without complaint, which in him resembled praise. Outside, the yard came alive by degrees. Horses nickering, men calling to one another, gate chains striking wood. Clara carried a tray to the back step where Mercer stood pulling on work gloves. "You've not eaten." "I will. You are eating now." He looked at the plate, then at her. "You order everyone?" "Only those inclined to neglect themselves." He took the biscuit and walked away with it. By the time the sun cleared the eastern ridge, she had inventoried the pantry, cellar, and smokehouse. Flour enough for 2 weeks if rationed properly. Salt pork fair, beans abundant, coffee dwindling, sugar nearly gone, kerosene lower than wise. Someone had stacked apples beside onions and ruined both. She wrote lists in a fresh ledger, each line crisp and unsentimental. Near noon, shouting broke from the yard. Clara stepped onto the porch. A yearling steer had caught one hind leg between split rails and thrashed itself bloody. Ned tugged uselessly at the fence. Boone cursed the animal. Pritchard kept safely back. Mercer dropped from the saddle and went straight in, seizing the horns to steady the beast. It lunged, nearly dragging him down. "Rope!" he barked. No one moved fast enough. Clara was already running. She snatched the coil from the wagon bed, slid through mud, and tossed one end clean to Mercer. He caught it without looking. Together, they looped the forelegs, drew the animal sideways, and pinned its weight long enough for Ned to wrench the broken rail free. The steer burst loose and limped away, snorting blood and steam. Mercer straightened, breath smoking hard. Mud striped Clara's skirt to the knee. Boone stared. She ran at it. It was trapped, Clara said. It had horns. So do some men. Ned laughed aloud this time. Mercer crouched by the blood on the fence rail. "Bring salve," he told no one in particular. Clara went herself, returning with carbolic, linen strips, and needle. The steer had backed into a corner of the corral, trembling. "You sew dresses," Boone said. "Not cattle. I sew torn flesh. Cloth complains less." Mercer watched her enter the pen. The yearling rolled an eye white with fear. Clara spoke low, meaningless syllables in a voice used once for frightened children and once for herself. She laid a hand on the hot flank, found the gash, and stitched, while Mercer held the halter rope taut. Her fingers moved with practiced economy. In another life, she had assisted a doctor who believed widows were invisible enough to be useful. He had taught her wounds, because no apprentice son wished the task. When she finished, she knotted the thread and stepped back. "There. Keep flies off it." Ned looked at her as if she had turned rain from stone. Mercer released the rope slowly. "Where'd you learn that?" "From necessity." He held her gaze a moment longer than required. Something had shifted again, one inner bolt sliding free. That afternoon she went to town with the supply list, because trusting previous purchasers seemed foolish. Mercer drove the wagon. Mud sucked at the wheels where frost had softened. "You needn't escort me," she said. "I need nails. You need oversight. I need nails." She let him keep the fiction. The mercantile bell rang as they entered. Warmth, lamp oil, leather, and spice crowded the air. Shelves climbed to the ceiling. Behind the counter stood Mr. Talbot, narrow mustache trimmed sharp enough to cut paper. His smile reached Clara first and warmed nowhere else. "Miss Whitfield. Thought we'd lost you to unpaid rent." Mercer's posture changed beside her, not visibly to strangers, but enough that the room felt smaller. "I am here to purchase," Clara said. "With whose credit?" Talbot asked. "Mine," Mercer said. Talbot's brows rose. "Generous?" "Careful," Mercer replied. The merchant laughed too quickly and turned for the order book. Clara moved through the aisles, selecting by weight and quality, not by Talbot's suggestions. Twice she caught him altering sums before ink dried. Twice she corrected him aloud. This flour was marked lower on the barrel. "Old chalk," he said. "Fresh mark. These nails are counted short. Standard keg. Open it." Customers drifted nearer under the pretense of browsing. Public arithmetic drew a crowd faster than music. Talbot flushed. "You accuse me in my own store?" "I calculate in your store. The accusation arrives from the numbers." Mercer said nothing. He merely stood at her shoulder, broad and silent as a wall. At last, Talbot slammed the pencil down. "Take the lot at cost and be done." "No," Clara said calmly. "We will take the lot at the honest price, and you will rewrite the last 3 invoices sent to Mercer Ridge." Murmurs spread. Talbot looked to Mercer. "You let her speak for you?" Mercer answered without moving his eyes from the man. "I don't let her do anything." The store went quiet enough to hear the stove tick. Talbot swallowed. 3 invoices may be difficult to retrieve. "Then I'll retrieve them with the sheriff," Clara said. He found the papers. They left with fair goods, corrected accounts, and half the town's newly interested in Mercer Ridge. On the wagon home, sacks shifting behind them, Clara held the revised invoices against the wind. "You might have warned me Talbot cheats. I knew he overcharged. You knew and continued buying. I was busy drowning." She remembered her own words from the kitchen and felt the sting of hearing them returned plain. After a mile, he spoke again. "You did well." The compliment came awkward as an unused tool. "So did you." I stood there. "Exactly." He glanced over. "That praise? It is from me." The road narrowed through cottonwoods near the creek. Evening light went gold across the water. For a few breaths there was no debt, no gossip, no hostile hands waiting at home, only wheels, horse breath, and the strange ease of shared purpose. Then they rounded the bend and saw smoke rising black from the direction of the ranch. Mercer snapped the reins hard. The bays lunged forward. Clara grabbed the seat as the wagon flew over ruts. "What is it?" "Barn," he said, and for the first time since she had met him, fear was naked in his voice. The wagon hit the yard at a run. Mercer was over the side before the wheels stopped turning. Smoke boiled from the open barn doors in thick black ropes. Not a full blaze yet. Worse in some ways. A hidden fire could choose where to kill. "Horses," Mercer said, already moving. He vanished into the smoke. Clara jumped down, skirts tangling at her boots. Ned came sprinting from the pump with 2 buckets slamming against his knees. Boone and Pritchard dragged a hose line from the trough, cursing knots in each other. "Where were you?" Clara demanded. "North pasture," Ned gasped. "Saw it too late, then stopped staring and work." She seized 1 bucket, plunged it into the trough, and ran for the side door. Heat struck her face at once. Inside, hay smoldered in the loft. Sparks rained from above. 2 geldings screamed in their stalls. Mercer emerged, leading 1 horse half-blind with terror, soot black across his cheek. He thrust the rope at Boone. "Take him." Then he turned back. Clara caught his sleeve. "The loft's lit. Roof may go." He looked at her hand on him, then at her face. "There's another horse. So send someone else. No one else knows him." He tore free and went in again. She hated him in that instant for making duty look like fate. "Ned with me," she said. They soaked blankets at the trough and carried them inside, bent low beneath the smoke. Clara tied one over her mouth. Through the haze, she saw flames chewing the ladder to the loft. Above, embers crawled through dry hay like red insects. The second gelding kicked at the stall gate. Mercer fought the latch with gloved hands. "It's warped," he coughed. Ned hurled water at the posts. Steam burst back. Clara scanned once, fast. A block and tackle hung near the feed room, grain sacks stacked beneath. "Cut the hinge pins," she said. "With what?" Ned shouted. She snatched an axe from the wall and drove its pole against the top hinge. Iron screamed. Again, again. The pin dropped. Mercer hit the lower hinge while she struck the top once more. The gate sagged. The gelding burst through, slamming Clara sideways into the boards. Pain flashed bright through her shoulder. Then the horse was gone, Mercer after it, driving it toward daylight. A crack thundered overhead. "Out!" Ned yelled. The loft beam split. Burning hay cascaded down. Clara grabbed the account satchel lying by the tack room door, Mercer's cursed papers even here, and ran bent double through smoke so thick it turned the world to ash. They burst into the yard as part of the roof caved inward with a roar. Heat rolled over everyone gathered there. For a moment no one moved. Then the work of the aftermath began. Bucket lines formed. Sparks stamped out in the mud. Horses tied far from danger. Hannah arrived in a shawl and immediately started issuing orders no one dared refuse. Clara's lungs burned raw. She coughed black into her handkerchief. Mercer crossed the yard, leading the rescued gelding. One sleeve had burned through at the cuff. He saw the soot on her face, the way she held her shoulder. "You hurt?" "Bruised." He reached for the arm anyway, fingers careful where moments ago they had been iron on rope. He tested movement once, jaw tight. "It'll darken by morning," she said. He did not release her at once. "Why'd you go back in?" he asked. She lifted the satchel hanging from one hand. "Because apparently your ledgers are worth dying for." For one stunned beat, he stared. Then he laughed outright, harsh and brief and real. Several ranch hands looked up in open disbelief. The sound changed the yard more than the fire had. By midnight, the flames were dead. Half the barn roof gone, one wall charred, hay ruined, tack smoked but salvageable. No stock lost. Someone had said it. Clara knew before Mercer spoke because lantern oil had burned too fast and too hot near the ladder base. He crouched by the blackened threshold, rubbing ash between thumb and forefinger. This wasn't an accident. Boone spat into the mud. Drifter, maybe. "No tracks but ours," Pritchard said. Mercer rose slowly. Then it was done by someone who knew the place. No one answered. Cold settled hard once the heat withdrew. The stars looked indifferent above the wreck. Inside the house, Hannah forced Clara into a chair and untied her blouse enough to inspect the shoulder. "Ugly bruise," the older woman declared. "You've a talent for arriving where trouble is busiest. It appears contagious." Hannah snorted and smeared liniment over the swelling. The sting made Clara hiss. Mercer stood by the stove, hands braced on the mantel, staring into coals as if they might confess names. "You suspect one of your men?" Clara asked. "I suspect Need. Need makes fools bold. That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got tonight." Hannah bandaged the shoulder with brisk competence. "Then sleep before dawn makes you stupider than the rest of us." She left by the back door, muttering about men and fire in equal contempt. Clara tried to rise. Pain stopped her halfway. Mercer crossed the room at once. He steadied her by the waist and elbow, grip firm, warm through scorched cloth. They froze there, closer than either had yet stood without necessity to excuse it. His gaze dropped to her mouth in a way so quickly she might have imagined it. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." He did not move his hands. The kitchen lamp hissed softly. Outside, somewhere in the dark, a horse stamped. "Why did you buy a lock for my door?" she asked. The question seemed to strike him harder than the fire. He let go and stepped back. "Because men live rough when there's no woman in a house," he said, "and because I gave my word. That is half an answer. It's all you get tonight." He took the lamp and walked her to the stairs. At the first step she stopped, one hand on the rail. "You went back for the horse," she said. "You would have died for it." "No. For what then?" He looked up at her from the lower stair, face shadowed, eyes pale in lamplight. "For what was mine to save." The words carried more than he meant them to. They both heard it. She climbed before either could answer. In her room she sat on the bed fully dressed, shoulder throbbing, heart worse. Through the floorboards came the muted sound of him pacing below. He had not said she was his. He had said nothing near it. Yet all night she lay awake knowing the house below her was no longer only a place of wages and terms. If you felt the moment when duty begins turning into something far more dangerous, you know how little sleep follows it. And if you were Clara, hearing footsteps below your room until dawn, What would you hope he was fighting, fire or himself? 3 days passed under the smell of wet ash and fresh-cut pine. Men from neighboring spreads came with wagons of lumber, tools, and opinions. The ruined side of the barn stood open to the weather like a broken jaw. Mercer worked from first light until stars rose, hammer in hand beside hired men who glanced at him differently now that they had seen him laugh and nearly burn. Clara managed the stream of labor as if born to command kitchens under siege. Bread by the dozen, stew in iron kettles, coffee never empty, bandages for split knuckles, lists for nails, hinges, tar, oats. She moved one-armed where possible, the bruise on her shoulder blooming purple beneath her sleeve. No one questioned her place anymore. Not allowed. By the fourth morning, Hannah arrived with jars of preserves and gossip sharpened by travel. Town says Mercer Ridge has taken in a lady accountant, a schoolmarm widow, or a secret bride. Depends who lies prettier. I am none of those, Clara said. Hannah set jars on the shelf. Truth rarely outruns amusement. She lowered her voice. Talbot has been speaking against you. Then his recovery from arithmetic is complete. He says you meddle where men conduct business. Clara tied off a sack of flour. Men conducted business poorly enough to require interruption. Hannah's eyes gleamed. I like you more each visit. Before noon, Mercer came in carrying a warped door plank across one shoulder. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the cold. Sawdust clung to his forearms. You need anything from town? He asked. Yes. Kerosene, yeast, and the county tax register. He frowned. That last item is not sold by the pound. It is held at the clerk's office. I know where it's held. Then fetch it. He leaned the plank against the wall. Why? Because your tax notice remains wrong, and I prefer facts before accusation. He studied her for a moment. You command everyone? Only those inclined to neglect themselves, she said, handing back his own line. That earned the ghost of a smile. I'll hitch up. She went with him. Eho. The road to town had softened into ruts of brown mud. Cottonwoods along the creek showed the first small buds, stubborn green against gray bark. They rode with supply sacks behind them and the silence between them that no longer felt hostile. At length he said, Boone asked for extra wages. For rebuilding. For staying. And did you grant them? No. Then expect resentment. I already employ it. She turned the tax notice over in her lap. Why keep Boone? He can break a bronc, mend wire in sleet, and work 12 hours without complaint. He complains constantly, about everything but labor. That, she conceded, was fair. Town was fuller than before. Wagons lined the street. Women with baskets paused to watch them arrive. Men on the boardwalk tipped hats to Mercer and looked twice at Clara seated beside him. Inside the clerk's office, ledgers towered like tombstones. County Clerk Ames, a balding man with spectacles too small for his nose, blinked when Clara requested the tax register. Madam, these records are not browsing material. They are public records. They are orderly records, she smiled without warmth. Then we shall suit each other. Mercer remained by the door, arms folded, saying nothing. Yet no one mistook his silence for absence. The error took 20 minutes to find. Acreage miscopied from a neighboring parcel, charging Mercer Ridge for land it did not own and water rights it had never held. Clara tapped the page. There. Ames adjusted spectacles 3 times. Well? Correct it. There are procedures. Begin them. The clerk looked helplessly at Mercer. He said, She's right. Ames sighed the sigh of a man defeated by competence. Forms will be filed. Today, Clara said. They stepped back onto the street with corrected papers pending and 2 more enemies in town than they'd had before breakfast. At the mercantile porch, Talbot waited, hat tipped low, smile polished. Miss Whitfield. Mr. Mercer. Productive outing? Exceptionally, Clara said. Talbot's gaze slid to Mercer. You let her lead you from office to office now? Mercer's expression did not alter. Careful, Talbot. The merchant ignored the warning. A rancher, with a woman doing his figures, appears weak. Folks notice. Clara felt the street listening. Before she could answer, Mercer stepped down from the boardwalk to stand level with the man. Folks notice I'm solvent again, he said. They can draw their own conclusions. Talbot's smile cracked. Mercer turned away, ending the matter as if swatting dust from a sleeve. In the wagon home, Clara kept her eyes on the road because looking at him felt suddenly too revealing. "You needn't answer every fool for me," she said. "I answered for myself." That was not how it sounded. He drove another few yards before replying. "Then hear it plain. Any man who speaks against you in public speaks against this house." Warmth rose under her collar despite the wind. She should have thanked him. Instead, she said, "You are becoming practical." He grunted. Dangerous habit. That evening, rain came hard and sudden, drumming the porch roof, turning the yard to black mire. Workers trapped by weather crowded the kitchen after supper, boots steaming near the stove. Ned played a cracked fiddle badly. Hannah criticized his timing from a rocker she had claimed without permission. Clara mended shirts at the table. Mercer carved replacement pegs for tack straps. Their work rhythms fell together without planning. At one point, the lamp guttered. She reached to trim the wick at the same moment he reached to steady the glass. Their hands closed over the same metal stem. Neither withdrew at once. Rain beat the windows. Laughter rose from the men. Yet the small space between their joined hands seemed louder than the room. Then Boone shoved back from the wall. "Storm's easing," he said. "I'll check the south shed." Mercer looked at the black panes. "Wait till morning." Boone's jaw set. "Roof leaks on my saddle, then let it leak." Boone snatched his coat and went anyway. Mercer stood with a curse under breath and followed. 10 minutes later, Ned burst through the back door white-faced. "Come quick!" They found Boone in the yard beside the shed, sprawled in mud under a collapsed beam. Rainwater streamed off the broken roof. The horse inside kicked in panic. Mercer dropped to his knees beside the man. Legs trapped. Boone's face shone with pain and rain. "Leave it. Save the horse." "No." Clara was already at the beam. "It shifted from rot," she said. "Lift wrong and it crushes him." "Can you free him?" Mercer asked. "Yes, if men obey." He did not hesitate. "You heard her." Ned and Pritchard took positions where she placed them. She wedged fence posts beneath the beam, used a jack from the wagon, and redirected the weight inch by inch while Mercer held Boone's shoulders clear of the mud. "Now," she said. They lifted. Mercer dragged Boone free as the beam crashed down where his leg had been. The horse burst from the shed behind them, wild-eyed and unharmed. Boone groaned once, then gripped Mercer's sleeve. "I was wrong," he said through clenched teeth. "About what?" Boone's eyes shifted to Clara standing in the rain with mud to her knees. "Most things." They carried him inside. Later, after the leg was splinted and the house quieted, Clara stood alone on the porch. Rain had passed. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. Water dripped from the eaves in patient intervals. Mercer came out beside her, coatless, shirt sleeves rolled. "You saved him," he said. "We saved him. He'd have died if I'd handled it my way." "You are skilled at force," she said. "Not always at leverage." He leaned one shoulder against the post. "That an insult?" "It is an education." He looked over the dark yard where the rebuilt barn rose black against stars. Then, low enough that only night could overhear, he said her name for the first time. Clara. Nothing in the world had changed, yet everything had. After he said her name, silence became a different thing between them. Not emptiness, not distance, a space alive with all that neither of them was built to speak. Clara went inside before she trusted herself to answer in kind. She lay awake listening to the house settle and to footsteps that did not pace tonight. Once she heard his door open down the hall. Once she heard it close. No more. Morning came clear and bright after the storm. Sun struck puddles in the yard and turned them to shards of light. Boone, pale and furious at helplessness, occupied a chair by the stove with his splinted leg propped on another. Hannah supervised him with the pleasure of a woman granted lawful authority over stubborn flesh. "Don't glower," she told him. "It wastes strength." "I ain't glowering." "You were born glowering." Ned laughed into his coffee. Clara kneaded bread while Mercer checked harness near the back door. He glanced toward her twice and away twice. A man more comfortable facing fire than feeling had no better strategy than retreat. By noon, she carried ledgers to the porch where the light was strongest. The wind moved warm for the first time that season. Dust smelled different when spring touched it. Mercer returned from the lower pasture with 2 letters in hand. "One for me," he said, "one for you." She took the envelope, startled. Few people wrote to her. The paper was cheap, the hand unfamiliar. She broke the seal and read. The rooming house in Wichita, where she had once taught bookkeeping to boarders' daughters, had closed. The owner's niece, who had written, offered regret and nothing else. There would be no old position to return to if this arrangement failed. Mercer watched her fold the letter. Bad news. Only the kind that confirms itself. He held out his own page. Read. It is addressed to you. I know. She took it. A lawyer from Denver, representing one Gideon Talbot, elder brother to the merchant, claimed an old note held against Mercer's late father had gone unpaid and intended legal seizure of pasture acreage within 30 days. She looked up sharply. This note was never in your files. Never saw it. Then it was kept from you or forged. Can you prove either? Not yet. His gaze stayed on her face. Yet. She hated how much confidence he placed there, hated more that she wanted to deserve it. That afternoon they rode the boundary fences together to inspect acreage named in the claim. She rode a steady mare borrowed from Hannah, skirts pinned for safety, spine aching by the second mile but pride refusing complaint. The land rolled wide under the clean sky. Calves kicked in new grass, meadowlarks flashed from posts. Out here the ranch seemed less a failing business than a country entire. My father signed many notes, Mercer said at last, borrowed against rain, against hope, against next year. Did he drink? No. Gamble? No. Then what ruined him? Mercer's jaw worked once, belief that weather owed him fairness. They rode in silence after that. At the far fence, they found wire cut clean through. Mercer swung down at once. This wasn't a storm. She dismounted more carefully and knelt by the post, fresh boot prints in damp soil, one heel worn crooked. Recent, she said. He scanned the horizon. Could be boys. No boy carries fencing pliers with malice. He met her eyes. They were being pressed from more than one side now. They repaired the wire together. He held tension while she twisted the splice tight with gloved hands. Wind tugged loose strands of her hair. Once he reached as if to smooth one back, then let his hand fall to the pliers instead. The withheld gesture struck harder than touch might have. On the ride home, they passed Mrs. Keene's place, a widow with 3 children and a milk cow famous for kicking saints and sinners alike. The youngest child ran to the fence shouting Clara's name. You know them? Mercer asked. I mended coats in town. Children remember anyone who treats them as people. Mrs. Keene came from the yard wiping hands on her apron. Mr. Mercer, Miss Whitfield, heard you near burned alive and near rebuilt before supper. Town can't keep pace with you. She lowered her voice only enough to make it intimate, not private. That woman saved Boone, corrected Talbot, and has your kitchen smelling civilized. If you're fool enough not to value her, others will. Clara felt heat rise. Mercer's expression gave nothing away. We're obliged for the milk, he said, taking the offered pail. Mrs. Keene snorted. That was not the point. They rode on. She is meddlesome, Clara said. She's right often enough to be dangerous. And on this matter? He did not answer. At supper, Boone, humbled by pain and dependence, thanked Clara in front of the men with the sincerity of a man swallowing nails. She accepted with a nod and no triumph. Afterward, she worked alone in the office sorting old receipts by year. The room had once been a parlor. Now shelves of records lined the walls. Dust, lamp oil, and old paper made their own weather. Mercer entered carrying a wooden box, found this in the loft over the wash house. Inside lay bundles of letters, receipts, and a leather notebook swollen by age. She opened the notebook carefully. His father's hand, dates, loans, cattle counts, private remarks squeezed in margins. One line stopped her. Paid Talbot in full after harvest. Witnessed by J. Ames. She looked up. The county clerk. Mercer came around the desk fast enough to stir the lamp flame. You certain? She turned the book so he could see. His hand braced beside hers on the page, rough knuckles inches from her fingers. If Ames witnessed payment, she said, the new claim dies. If the record still exists. If it was not destroyed. They both thought of Talbot. He bent closer to read again. She could feel the heat of him along her shoulder, smell clean sweat and cedar soap over dust. Neither moved away. Slowly, as if crossing a line visible only to himself, he He lifted one hand and touched the bruised place now yellowing beneath her sleeve. "Still sore?" he asked. "Yes, I should have kept you from the barn. You could not have. I could have tried harder." She turned then, and they were far too near. "You are not responsible for every danger under your roof," she said softly. His eyes dropped to her mouth again. "Stayed there this time." "No," he said. "Only the ones I invite." The air changed. He might have kissed her. She might have let him. Instead, the front door slammed hard enough to shake the house. Ned's voice tore through the hall. "Mercer, you need to come now." They broke apart at once. Outside in the yard stood Sheriff Bell with 2 deputies and Talbot beside him, smug beneath a polished hat. The sheriff held a paper in gloved hands. "Court order," he called, "pending debt claim, no cattle leave Mercer Ridge, no assets sold, and all books subject to inspection." Talbot smiled directly at Clara. "Evening, Miss Whitfield. Seems your sums just got more difficult." Wind skimmed the yard and rattled the loose hinge on the rebuilt barn, while every man present watched Mercer decide whether to obey or break. He did neither. "Bring it inside," he said to the sheriff. Bell looked relieved. Talbot looked less so. They crowded into the kitchen where lamplight fell over ledgers, drying herbs, and the plain evidence that the house now ran on order. Clara took the court paper first. Her eyes moved once down the page. "This filing is defective." Talbot laughed. "You grow tiresome." She ignored him. "The acreage named is wrong. The debt amount conflicts with the attached note, and there is no clerk's seal on the affidavit." Sheriff Bell frowned and leaned closer. "That true?" "It is visible," Clara said. Talbot's color rose. "Minor errors." "No," she said, "material fraud." Mercer said nothing. He only stood behind her chair, one hand resting on its back, like a vow made in wood and bone. Clara opened the notebook from the wash-house loft and turned it toward the sheriff. "Here is Elias Mercer's father, recording payment in full, witnessed by J. Ames, county clerk." Bell swore softly. "Ames signed this?" "He witnessed it," Clara said, "and if he entered the payment in county books, this claim is dead." Talbot took one quick step toward the notebook. Mercer moved once, blocking him so completely the merchant stopped as if he had struck a wall. "Don't," Mercer said. The room went still. Bell folded the order. "I'll verify with Ames at first light. Till then, nothing leaves this ranch and nothing enters your hands either, Talbot. This is an outrage," Talbot snapped. "It may be jail," Bell replied. Talbot left in a fury sharp enough to trail through the open door like smoke. When the deputies had gone and the yard quieted, Clara sagged back in the chair. Only then did she feel the shaking in her hands. Mercer crouched before her. "You all right?" Yes. It was a lie. He knew it. Without asking, he took her hands in his. His palms were warm, scarred, steady. He looked at their joined fingers as if they were harder to face than fire. "I was losing this place before you came," he said. "Land, house, myself." She tried to answer. Nothing came. He lifted his eyes to hers at last. "Stay when this arrangement ends." The words were plain, stripped of pride, stripped of defense. "As what?" she whispered. "My wife, if you'll have me. My partner, whether you do or not." The kitchen seemed to hold its breath with her. Outside, a horse stamped in the dark. The stove ticked softly. Somewhere down the hall, Boone coughed and wisely remained where he was. Clara touched his rough cheek with one trembling hand. "Yes," she said without hesitation. He closed his eyes once, like a man hit by grace he had not expected. Then he rose, drew her gently to her feet, and held her against the steady beat of a heart she already knew by sound. At dawn, they would fight the claim, the town, and whatever else came riding. Tonight, the house was warm, and neither of them stood alone in it.